Hi folks, I was asked to do an explanation on the effects send and return signal path, just so we get an idea of what it looks like. And someone had a very good suggestion. Let's go back to our analog days, find out what send and return means too. So this is just a little Alesis unit. Before we had digital boards with effects built into it, if we wanted reverb, we had to use this like an external unit. Again, this is just a little reverb. They come in all just kind of flavors. But the idea is that we have to take a signal from the board and we have to send it into this unit. This unit has both an input and an output. Hope you can see that there. And so we take a signal from the board and we send it into this reverb unit. Once we have the reverb, now we have to take the output and we have to return that back into the board. All right, so that's where the term send and return comes from. We have to first of all send a signal to it, and then once we have the excuse me, once we have the effects applied, then we have to take the output and return it back into the board to where we're going. Okay, so that's where the concept of send and return comes from. And again, from the board, send to reverb, from the reverb, return to wherever we want it in that process. So the only thing that's different nowadays, of course, is that this little unit and many others are actually built into the QSC board. I'll put that down. And so now we have those effects built in. On this particular, I'm using a Q16. On a Q16, I have two effects layers for effects 1 and effects 2. So let's do a bit of an example here. In order to send, first of all, we need two components. Every time we send, we need two components. So first of all, we have to have some microphone levels, some channel levels. So I've got some microphones, whatever. I'll just bring some of those up there. And then the second component to sending is the master. And this is exactly the same as if I was sending information to my left and right. If I go to left and right, I have to have both channel signal and a master signal. If I just turn up some channels, I'm not going to hear those microphones in left and right. Likewise, if I just turn up the send, master send, I'm not going to hear those microphones in left and right. So in order to send a signal anywhere, it's two things. I need microphone channel levels plus the master level. Right? I need both. And that would be to send, in this case, to send to my left and right output. So effects are exactly the same way. So let's shut that down there for a minute. Let's go to effects 1. Assume we've got effects 1. And again, I can bring all these down. I'll just do an example here. So, yeah, let's do that. So effects 1. Start with, let's do an example. I've got two singers. They happen to be on channels 9 and 11. So the first thing I got to do in effects 1 layer is I've got to give a level for the channels. And then the second thing is I have to send a master. So I need channel level and a master level. So that's my send, and I'm now sending that into effects 1. Now, up in the screen, of course, you can set up your effects however you want. I'm using the default reverb for FX 1 because that's not bad for my basic use, and it'll do for today's example. So effects 1, I have channel levels and effects 1. So that's now putting a signal into the effects engine. Again, it's internal to the board, like the little Alesis unit I just showed you, which was external. This happens to be internal. But now we've got to return that signal. Now that we put signal into the effects engine is creating the reverb. Now we've got to return that into the board. All right, so we do that on every output as we choose by simply selecting the output. In this case, I'll go to left and right. So I want some of that reverb in my left and right. Well, first thing I have to do is go to the upper layer, select upper layer. Again, if I select the lower layer, all my sliders are controlling my channels. If I go to upper layer, then my sliders are controlling here. I've got first 3 are stereos, and these are my 4 FX returns. So in this case, I've got FX1 as my return. So depending on what how much effects I want, I'm going to bring that. Should have that shut down too, just for this example. Let's just shut all this down. I'll make sure everything's shut down there. Okay, so in left-right, in order to bring my reverb into left-right, I go to my upper layer, FX1 return, and I can put in as much of that reverb as I want to go to my left and right. This is the effects return. So this is the return process. Now, one of the nice things about the digital board is I can return it in multiple places and adjust the level. So again, if I go back to my channels for FX1, I've sent 2 microphones and a send into FX1. Now I want to go back to left and right, again looking at the layers. So here's my FX1 return. So this is the return, all right, that I'm showing or bringing back in. I'm returning that back into left and right. So this is going to put effects in left and right. Typically, those 2 singers on microphones 9 and 11 are going to, maybe they want that reverb in their monitors. Now, let's assume that in my example, those 2 singers on microphones 9 and 11 each have a floor wedge monitor in front of them, and they are 2 separate mixes. All right. So let's say channel 9 is in mix 1. So now I can go to mix 1 and bring up the effects return in mix 1. That puts that reverb into mix 1. Now I go to mix 2. That's the second singer's monitor wedge. And again, on my upper layer, FX1 return, I can return that signal into mix 2. And I can do, so now I've returned that in 3 different places. In my left, right, again, upper layer, FX1 return. Let's say I want just a little bit in front of house, okay? In mix number 1, which is the singer who happens to be singing on my left, they also want just a little bit of reverb. That's great. In mix 2, that's the singer on the other side. Well, they want a whole lot of reverb. I can push that reverb way up there. Not a problem. This is the effects return, only returning into mix 2. Again, look at mix 1, it's still down here. Look at left and right, that's the level that I'm bringing the FX1 return. So I can have that level independent on every mix. Somebody asked, well, how do I have the in-ear monitor be different without affecting front of house? Well, let's do that. Let's say we got a third singer who's listening to in-ear monitors on mix 9 and 10. So mix 9 and 10, again, upper layer, FX1 return. This would be the reverb in mix 9 and 10. And that's completely independent of, I can put it way up there, that's completely independent of left and right, which doesn't change. Completely independent of mix 1, again, effects return, didn't change. Completely independent of mix 2, again, effects return, it's also quite high, maybe we don't want it quite that high. And again, mix 9 and 10, there we go. So, again, 3 components to the FX signal channel. Number 1, you've got to have channel signal. So if I go back to the FX, send, and I'm going to look at my channels. I've got to send channels, and I have to have a master level. Now, to be honest with you, typically in my scenario, I would just simply use, I would set the channels at unity and the send level also at unity. And then I would mix using the returns, because that's where you want different amounts of the reverb, in this case the reverb being the effect. You want different amounts at the return. So again, once we're sending into FX1, now I can return it in left and right. I can return it. I've got to look at the upper layer and FX1 return. That's the amount of reverb coming back into left and right. Mix 1, upper layer, FX1 return. There's the amount of reverb coming into mix 1. Mix 2, upper layer, FX1. There's the amount of reverb coming into FX2, or to mix 2. And 9 and 10, upper layer, FX1 return. There's the amount of reverb coming into mix 9 and 10 for those in-ears. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.